This photo of Penny was taken in Canada, I think, a couple of years ago, 2017. And she's got that characteristic camera in her hands. And with that camera, Penny wove magic. So the rest of the photos I'll talk about aren't of Penny, but by Penny. In her adult life, Penny had a number of jobs, but above all, she was a photographic artist. And as an artist, she appreciated other people's art. So one of the things Penny most loved to photograph was street art. She photographed it in the streets of Berlin, where this mural was. She'd photograph murals as complex as that, or as simple as the following one, which was also in Berlin. Then there are others, like the next one, that also were from Berlin, and they also had very overt messages. Some of the street art she photographed was truly iconic. This, for example, was a Banksy in Bristol in the UK. I don't even know whether that building wasn't being demolished so somebody could get their hands on the Banksy. And there's another Bristol building that she photographed, and it had a whole wall devoted to, well, a very recognisable piece of street art, the Stickmen, that Penny really liked. And then there's another piece of art she photographed from East London. This one's more complex and very evocative. Across the Atlantic, Penny shot this in San Francisco. And then there was this one, shot in a Christchurch side street. In Australia, she photographed artworks like this one, which, as with many, no longer exists. That is, the artwork, not the Brisbane Cafe. And also like this one in Newcastle. But the city where she photographed most street art, the city that she really loved, was Melbourne. There are many terrific street artworks in Melbourne, and I can only highlight a few of Penny's photos here. A major contribution, I feel, was documenting the rise of Hosier Lane through the work of numerous street artists to become one of the many vibrant Melbourne canvases. So Penny documented some outstanding art. Some of it was in black and white. Some of it was in colour. In some, the people were ancillary to the art. In some, their presence was really pivotal to it, like in this stunner. Some were close-ups of faces. Some were more distant. And in some, the faces were almost hidden dreamily by the artist. In some, Penny showed her love of music, as in this work defining Amphlett Lane, or in the following celebration of one of her favourite singers, Cyndi Lauper. And then there was this piece about Prince, another of her favourites. But Penny did not just photograph the street arts of Melbourne. She loved the city, and she documented the cityscapes. She looked for the juxtaposition of buildings against each other and against the skies. She looked at their interiors, both looking up and looking down, at the riverscapes, at the beaches, and at the rowers. She saw Melbourne as a work of art in itself, never more so than when White Nights was on. It illuminated the outsides and the interiors of buildings, of city landmarks. She taught others how to appreciate the city through photography. She delighted in photographing the photographers themselves during these classes, seeing photographers as sometimes being part of the art. She would say to the students, who'd then follow her Facebook page, which was Penny Koukoulas Photography, well, this week's challenge is to photograph something pink, or to photograph something that will switch you on. But of course, she didn't restrict her eye to Melbourne. She caught many striking images of Canberra, including some during her night photography classes, as well as during the daytime. She captured the natural beauty of its lake and of its botanic gardens. She showed us Brisbane during the day, and she showed its colour at night. And the time-lapse photograph revealed the slow-moving wheel of Brisbane here. Not far away, she shot the beaches and the towers of the Gold Coast and some of its other towers. In Sydney, she showed the beachside pools, the beaches themselves, the stunning harbour, and the silhouettes of night. Her love of street art was also a love of art on the streets, be it these stunning statues, this more abstract form, or the wonderful reflections created by this sculpture. She'd go indoors for this work by Roan, who's normally an outdoor street artist. She'd photograph from the floor, or was it the ceiling, like this, and she'd record how people reacted to art in galleries, whether in Germany, like this, or to these two works of art at the Gallery of Modern Art in Brisbane. And when other cities, not just Melbourne, used the precision light technology, she'd be there. This was the outside of the National Library in Canberra. As with art, Penny loved nature. She did some colossal close-ups, both of animals and of plants, be they Australian native bushes, or trees, or ferns, or flowers, and some wonderful close-ups of bark. And then she took some stark long-distance shots of trees, like this one, from a balloon in the air above New South Wales. Or, looking up instead of down, this pelican. She showed us trees in the mist, the red leaves of a tree against a blue sky, the contrast between leaves and clouds, and the silhouettes of a sunset. She loved this picture of a tree growing sideways from a cliff and then upwards. She took this lovely landscape of rural Victoria and a lonely path through a forest. And in Cuba, she found crabs migrating en masse to the seas. Penny was in fact a great travel photographer, and there was nowhere that she loved more than Cuba and applying her arts there. This is one of her best photos, I think. Taken in Cuba, it shows a man walking along the street, his head framed by two drumming hands in a street mural. The man in colour and the background almost in black and white. Here's Havana at dusk. There's the evocative shot of a window in a Cuban house. These two people inside a ration store. This action shot of four men playing soccer in the balcony of an old building. These children riding bicycles in an old Havana street. This mural on the side of an old decaying building. This horse and cart in a Cuban town. A townscape, a country scene, a city sky. And Penny also spent some time in Canada, including a recent sojourn in the Maritime provinces. She loved to highlight variety in colour and the way it was used, even in old boys. Well, light was something that she looked for, and unusual rock formations. Here the magnificent lakes of Western Canada. She photographed these lobster traps in the Maritimes, In this photo, all the lines of the shelves point to the central subject, a cheesemaker. And see the lines on this old Citroen truck. And these lines of buildings and wharves in coastal Canada. In Vancouver, she showed us these laughing men statues by Chinese artist Weiwei. In China itself, she captured a mode of transport that, well, not so many use now. Well, she went to the entrance of the Forbidden City in Beijing, and she climbed the Great Wall, even while others took a more leisurely route. She went to Laos, a predominantly Buddhist country, where the ironwork frames what you see, and where temples dominate many spaces. Inside there is plentiful colour and detail that Penny captured. She photographed this girl concentrating very hard in taking a selfie, and this group of rather rascally looking kids and their dog. But one of my favourite photos of her is this one, taken in the early morning. A line of 6 monks walk along a street. In the background, the jagged mountains punctuated by low-hanging cloud or mist create an eerie effect. I think it's quite stunning. Adjacent to Laos is Cambodia, and here Penny framed one part of Angkor Wat with another. In Singapore, she took this remarkable, seemingly paradoxical photo of swimmers looking down upon the city. She loved Europe, and this trio of sequential statues in Budapest caught her eye, and so did the view from the Danube. She would frame the views of palaces with openings in fences or passageways. And she got inside the Gellert baths of Budapest. In Croatia, Penny took these perspectives of a balcony and a small port and the skies above a church. This was how she saw Berlin. This was how she saw Strasbourg. This was how she saw the view from the pyramids in Mexico. And Penny lined up this remarkable shot of a beach in Spain. At first glance, the sand and the sea look like they're part of the fence. Then you realise that she's matched the lines perfectly. Were it not for the land in the background, you could be taken in by this illusion altogether. Spain provided some unusual lines. Inside buildings, she saw curved lines rather than the straight lines. She picked up curves outside buildings. She found thick, uneven glass that created an illusion of bizarre curves. And she found bizarrely designed buildings and sculptures that used curves where straight lines were expected to be. In the west coast of the US, she found some very straight lines for an LA pier. And some of the most spectacular natural shots were across the ditch in the South Island of New Zealand. From aerial views of great mountain ranges to the lakes around Queenstown, look at how the light here touches the lone tree in the water and the many trees on the beach. Here the twisted tree at the front dominates the view of a lake and the mountains behind. Here at dusk the silhouettes of the visitors, human and avian, inspect the lake. But if there was one outdoor activity that entranced Penny as an adult, it was ballooning. Early morning is the best time for ballooning, and it can produce some wonderful light. She got some great photos as the balloons were raised, and she got some great photos of the inside of them. But maybe this one was the greatest ballooning photo. One of her best altogether. One balloon in the foreground below, one in the background above, and a stunning landscape all around. Penny had a very artistic eye. She looked for the art of lines in buildings. She looked for the art of colours in palings or in an outdoor cafe setting. She saw the contrast between the jaggedness of tree branches, the straight lines of buildings, the fluffy curves of cloud, between the darkness of the trees, the blue and white of the sky, and the silvery gold of the building. She captured this reflection of a building on a puddle in a Havana street. She saw the art in water on steel, in red dust on corrugated iron, or in dark rust on a car. She saw the contrast between nature and walls, and between the walls of nature and the walls of buildings. She saw art in a complex mosaic, or in a simply constructed bowl of limes, or in a flurry of umbrellas. She taught her night photography students how to make art with coloured light and the darkness, or with white light and the dark. And inverting that idea, she documented how light created shade. She photographed things that amused her, like this basketball hoop in Newcastle. This tall, toy-like man looking in a Berlin window. This soft toy tree in Melbourne. This Canadian bakery of toy breads. These door knockers in Cuba. This door knocker in Spain. She liked how this seemingly innocuous panoramic shot in Newcastle created the world's longest stretch limousine. She liked the name of the town in which this brewery was located, and she liked the name of this coffee shop. And she wore her causes on her sleeve. She loved dogs, such that I reckon she had more photographs of her dogs than any other subject. She'd photographed dog-related street art, and she had a public exhibition of photographs of lost dogs for the Lost Dogs Home, a cause she strongly believed in. That was a photo from it. These are a couple of others, as was this one. She was also a firm believer in marriage equality. She disliked Donald Trump. She was a strong believer in Indigenous rights. And as someone who loved Cuba, she was a passionate follower of the life and work of Che Guevara. The last movie that we watched together on her birthday was about his time and his death in Bolivia. And appropriately enough, Che was himself a photographer. This is his camera. Penny photographed it in a Cuban museum, and that's an appropriate note for me to finish on.